Hi, I'm Jessie, a third-year biomedical science student at the University of Birmingham, and I'm going to take you on a journey into the exciting research we do here on receptor signalling, and in particular in the endocannabinoid system and its effects throughout the body. But before we get on to that, along with some help from Han here, I'm going to explain how signals are passed throughout our bodies in this little structure here. This is what we call a neuron, also known as a nerve cell, which you may have heard before. The human body contains billions of these neurons, and they all make up our body's central and peripheral nervous system, which I'll explain a little bit later. The neuron is made up of different parts: the cell body, the dendrites, nucleus, myelin sheath, the nodes of Ranvier, synapse, and axon terminals. The myelin sheath insulates the neuron so that the signal can travel through faster. This is an important feature for neurons, as they carry information around the body by passing electrical and chemical signals to one another. These electrical signals are called action potentials and get passed down the body of the neuron to the synapses, where they are then converted into chemical signals. So, we've reached the synapse, and the synapse is made up of different parts too. The synapse receives the action potential, but it can't pass it on to the next neuron directly. So how does it get passed on? Well, once this action potential has reached the synapse, it causes calcium ion channels to open and ions flood into the membrane. This causes the vesicles to fuse to the presynaptic membrane and release a neurotransmitter into the synaptic cleft. This process is known as exocytosis. The neurotransmitter travels across the cleft, where it interacts with its receptors on the postsynaptic membrane of the next neuron, and this causes an action potential to fire in this neuron. This action potential travels down the new neuron to its synapse, where the whole process begins again. The neurotransmitter is then taken back into the presynaptic membrane in a process called reuptake, and it's done by the neurotransmitter reuptake pump, which is represented by this green gummy bear. This is also an area of research at the university, as we use mice models and the neurotransmitter noradrenaline to better understand how the rate of reuptake is regulated and also inhibited. So, as you've probably figured out, these neurons and their action potentials are pretty important, but how exactly do they get around the body and how are they all connected? Well, neurons make up the central and peripheral nervous systems. The neurons in the spinal cord and the brain make up the central nervous system, whereas the neurons in the rest of the body make up the peripheral nervous system, and it looks a little something like this. Together, they work to move your muscles, sense your environment, and control your everyday processes. The peripheral nervous system can then be split into 3 divisions, but for the purpose of this video, we'll focus on the autonomic nervous system, which is the division that controls involuntary responses. And it looks a little something like this. It looks complex, right? But if we divide it up, it's made up of 2 parts, the sympathetic division and the parasympathetic division. The sympathetic division is responsible for the fight or flight response, which you may have heard of before, and the parasympathetic is responsible for resting and digesting. These can be taken literally, as the sympathetic nervous system prepares you for action, so when it's activated, it increases your heart rate, blood pressure, and increases sweating, amongst other things. So if you were running from a tiger, for example, it means that you're more likely to get away. On the other hand, the parasympathetic does the opposite. So why are these nervous systems so relevant? Well, as I said, our current research at the university is looking into the endocannabinoid system, and this is interlinked with both the central and peripheral nervous systems, so I'm going to explain more about it now. And you're probably also thinking that the word may seem familiar to you, and yep, it involves exactly what you think it does: cannabis. We have naturally occurring neurotransmitters called endocannabinoids that activate cannabinoid receptors that, as you can see from this picture, they're pretty much found everywhere in the body, from our neurons in the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, and they're also found in our organs like the heart and the brain. More specifically, there are 2 main receptors which were only discovered in the 90s. The CB1 receptor and the CB2 receptor. The main target of our research here is the CB1 receptor, which are found in both the central and peripheral nervous systems. And these are activated by endocannabinoids such as anandamide and cannabis. These receptors are really important regulators of a whole spectrum of things like pain sensation, memory, mood, and appetite, as well as the effect of cannabis. CB1 receptors cause an inhibition of neurotransmitter release from the presynaptic membrane, though the exact mechanism is unknown, but it's thought to be due to maybe inhibiting the calcium channels. So, as you can imagine, if there was a signal transmitting pain or telling you to move, blocking this can help relieve the symptoms of Parkinson's and Huntington's or other motor-related diseases. The CB2 receptors, on the other hand, which are only found in the peripheral nervous system, have more of an immune regulator role. Particularly, they reduce inflammation and pain. Thus, the reason for the increasing use of medicinal marijuana in the treatment of diseases such as multiple sclerosis makes sense, as this is caused by inflammation. So we hear a lot about the legalization of cannabis in the news in its use in healthcare, but do you ever hear of the side effects that it can have? Well, that's because they aren't fully understood. So here at the university, we are currently researching the potential side effects. In particular, we focus on the effects that it can have on the heart. This is because numerous studies have shown that cannabis increases heart rate and increases blood vessel diameter, thus making the heart beat harder. This then increases the risk of heart attacks and stroke, particularly in people who have had a history of heart problems, hence the need for research that is done here at the university. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the video.